Before we begin this powerful story, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel. What you are about to witness is a moment of raw truth that will challenge everything you think you know about marriage, sacrifice, and the strength of the human spirit. This is not just entertainment. This is a story that will change how you see the relationships in your own life. Steve Harvey has spent decades making people laugh and bringing joy to millions of viewers around the world. His quick wit and genuine warmth have made Family Feud one of the most beloved game shows on television. But on a chilly November afternoon in 2024, Steve found himself completely speechless, frozen in place as a woman named Sarah Mitchell revealed a truth so devastating that it would leave the entire studio in stunned silence and force millions of viewers to confront uncomfortable questions about love, duty, and the price of commitment. The Mitchell family from Portland, Oregon stood on the Family Feud stage, appearing to be the picture of American normalcy. Sarah Mitchell, 43 years old, stood beside her husband Robert, who was 45. Their three teenage daughters, Emma, Olivia, and Sophie, bounced with excitement behind them, thrilled to be on national television. To any observer, they looked like countless other families who had appeared on the show over the years. A middle-class family, well-dressed and smiling, ready to compete for prize money and create memories together. But beneath the surface of their carefully maintained appearance lay a truth that Sarah had been carrying alone for nearly 5 years. A truth so heavy that it had changed everything about who she was and how she moved through the world. A truth that she had protected her family from knowing because she believed that some burdens were meant to be carried in silence. What no one in that studio could have known was that in less than 10 minutes, that silence would be shattered in the most public way imaginable. Sarah and Robert had met in college 22 years earlier. She was studying nursing, and he was pursuing a degree in business administration. They married young, just 21 and 23 years old, filled with dreams and optimism about building a life together. Sarah became a pediatric nurse, working in the neonatal intensive care unit at a major Portland hospital. Robert built a career in corporate sales, eventually becoming a regional manager for a medical supply company. They bought a house in a good school district, had 3 daughters in quick succession, and appeared to be living the version of success that their parents had hoped for them. Sarah loved her work with premature and sick newborns. She had a gift for it, a gentle touch and calming presence that seemed to soothe even the most fragile infants. Parents of babies in her care would specifically request her for shifts, trusting her with their most precious and vulnerable children. She found deep meaning in the work, in being present during some of the most frightening moments of new parents' lives and helping to guide tiny, struggling babies toward health and home. Robert's career had its ups and downs, but for the most part, they lived comfortably. They took modest vacations, saved for their daughters' college educations, and enjoyed the rhythm of suburban family life. Sarah worked 3 12-hour shifts per week at the hospital, which allowed her to be home when the girls returned from school. Robert traveled occasionally for work, but was generally present for family dinners and weekend activities. From the outside, they appeared to have achieved the balance that so many families struggle to find. Then, 5 years ago, everything changed. Robert was diagnosed with early-onset Alzheimer's disease at the age of 40. The diagnosis came after months of concerning symptoms that Sarah had initially attributed to stress. He would forget appointments, lose his train of thought mid-conversation, struggle to remember names of colleagues he had worked with for years. When the neurologist delivered the diagnosis, Sarah felt the floor drop out from under her. Alzheimer's at 40 was rare, aggressive, and devastating. The doctor explained that Robert's case was likely genetic, progressing faster than typical late-onset Alzheimer's. They had perhaps 5 to 7 years before he would require full-time care. Sarah made a decision that night that would define the next 5 years of her life. She would not tell anyone the full truth. Not her daughters, who were just entering their teenage years and deserved to enjoy that time without the shadow of their father's decline. Not her parents, who were elderly themselves and would worry themselves sick. Not her colleagues, who might treat her differently or question her ability to focus on her demanding job. And perhaps most significantly, she would not tell Robert's employer, because losing his health insurance before he qualified for disability would be financially catastrophic. Instead, Sarah became Robert's protector and enabler in ways that no one else could see. She managed his work calendar, sending him detailed notes each morning about meetings and client names. She set up elaborate reminder systems on his phone and computer, She called his assistant, pretending to be confirming his schedule, while actually ensuring that nothing critical had been missed. She coached him before social events, reviewing the names and relationships of people they would encounter. She covered for his mistakes, attributed his memory lapses to distraction, and shouldered an increasing portion of household management and parenting as his ability to contribute diminished. The weight of this secret grew heavier with each passing month. Sarah watched the man she loved slowly disappear, his personality and memories eroding bit by bit. He would forget conversations they had just had. He would ask the same questions repeatedly. He began struggling with tasks that had once been automatic, like programming the coffee maker or finding his way home from familiar locations. Each loss felt like a small death, a piece of their shared history vanishing into the fog of his deteriorating mind. But Sarah could not grieve openly. She could not cry to her friends because they did not know what she was losing. She could not seek support from family because she had decided they were better off not knowing. She could not even fully grieve with Robert because he still had enough awareness to be devastated by the acknowledgement of his decline. So she grieved alone, in her car during her commute, in the hospital bathroom during her breaks, in the shower after everyone had gone to bed. She grieved for the future they would not have, for the grandfather he would never be, for the old age they would not share. Her daughters began to notice changes in their father, of course. He forgot their school events sometimes. He repeated himself more often. He seemed distracted and distant in ways that hurt their feelings. But Sarah explained it away as work stress, as the natural preoccupation of middle age, as anything other than the devastating reality. She encouraged the girls to be patient with their father, to repeat things when he forgot, to gently remind him of plans. She framed it as normal family dynamics rather than the early stages of a terminal illness. The isolation of carrying this secret was profound. Sarah would sit at her daughter's school events, surrounded by other parents, unable to share what consumed her every waking thought. She would have lunch with friends who complained about typical marital frustrations, and she would nod sympathetically while thinking about how much she would give for their ordinary problems. She would go to work and care for sick babies with the same competence and compassion she had always shown, then come home to care for her husband in ways that broke her heart a little more each day. As Robert's condition progressed, maintaining the illusion became increasingly difficult. He had to give up driving after getting lost twice coming home from the grocery store. Sarah told everyone it was because of a minor fender bender and increased insurance costs. He reduced his work travel, which Sarah attributed to a company restructuring. He stopped participating in his usual weekend activities, like coaching the girls' soccer teams, which Sarah explained as back problems. Each lie required more lies to support it, creating an elaborate structure of deception that Sarah maintained through sheer force of will. The financial stress was crushing. Medical appointments, specialists, experimental treatments not covered by insurance, all of it depleted their savings. Sarah picked up extra shifts at the hospital, working 4 or sometimes 5 12-hour shifts per week instead of 3. She told her daughters she was saving for their college funds, which was true but not the whole truth. The whole truth was that she was trying to build a financial cushion for the catastrophic costs she knew were coming. Long-term memory care facilities cost thousands of dollars per month. The girls would need to finish high school and go to college. Sarah needed to be prepared to support everyone when Robert could no longer work at all. The Family Feud appearance came about through her daughter Emma, who had applied for the show months earlier as a fun family activity. When they were selected, Sarah's first instinct was to decline. How could they go on national television and pretend to be a normal, happy family when their reality was so different? But her daughters were so excited, and Robert, in one of his clearer moments, had encouraged her to do it. "We can still make good memories," he had said. "We should make as many as we can while I still remember them." So Sarah agreed, seeing it as perhaps one of the last normal family experiences they would have together. Now they stood on that stage, and Sarah felt the weight of 5 years of secrets pressing down on her. They had won the main game, and she found herself at the podium for fast money. The audience was energized, Steve was in good spirits, and her family was celebrating behind her. Everything about the moment suggested joy and excitement. But inside, Sarah felt something breaking. The pretense, the performance, the constant maintenance of a fiction that grew more exhausting every single day. Steve approached her with his characteristic warmth. "Sarah, you all have been great today. You are at 165 points, so you need just 35 more to win the $20,000. Before we start, tell me, what would you and your family do with that money if you win? It was a standard question, one Steve asked contestants multiple times every episode. Usually people said they would pay bills, take a vacation, save for college. Sarah opened her mouth to give a similar safe answer. But what came out was the truth. The money would go toward my husband's medical care. He has early onset Alzheimer's disease. He was diagnosed 5 years ago when he was 40 years old. He is only 45 now, but he is disappearing a little more every day. Our daughters do not know. They think their father is just stressed and forgetful. But I know. I watch him forget our anniversary, our first date, the day each of our daughters was born. I watch him struggle to remember my name sometimes. And I smile and pretend everything is fine because I do not want them to lose their father before they absolutely have to. The studio fell into complete silence. Steve Harvey, famous for never being at a loss for words, stood frozen. His mouth opened but no sound came out. Behind Sarah, she heard her daughters gasp. She heard Robert make a small sound that could have been a sob, but she could not stop now. 5 years of carrying this alone had finally become too much, and the dam had broken. Sarah continued, tears streaming down her face but her voice steady. I work extra shifts to save money for when he needs full-time care. I have learned everything I can about his disease. I manage his entire life so no one else knows how bad it has gotten. I am so tired. I am so tired of pretending. I am so tired of grieving alone. I am so tired of watching the man I love forget that he loves me. But I keep going because that is what you do when you made a vow, in sickness and in health. This is the sickness. This is me keeping my promise. Steve finally found his voice, though it was thick with emotion. Sarah, why have you not told your daughters? Why carry this alone? Sarah looked back at her girls, who were crying now, their young faces showing the shock of suddenly understanding so many things that had confused them. Because they deserve to have their father for as long as possible, she said. Right now, he is still their dad. He still shows up, even if he forgets sometimes. He still loves them, even if he cannot always remember why he is proud of them. The day I tell them the truth is the day they start losing him. I wanted to give them more time. I wanted to give him more time to just be their father instead of being a patient. Robert stepped forward, and everyone could see the tears on his face. The cameras caught the moment when he put his hand on Sarah's shoulder, a gesture so tender and loaded with meaning that the entire audience seemed to hold its breath. Sarah, he said, his voice clear despite his tears, I remember our wedding day. I remember the moment each of our daughters was born. I remember falling in love with you. Those memories are still there. Maybe they will not be someday, but right now they are, and you should not have carried this alone. You should not have protected me from the truth about my own life. Their daughters rushed forward, and the family collapsed into an embrace that embodied both devastating loss and fierce love. Steve Harvey stood watching, tears streaming openly down his face. The audience was crying. The crew members behind the cameras were crying. This was no longer a game show. This had become something far more profound, a moment of raw human truth playing out in front of millions. When Steve could finally speak, his voice was gentle. Sarah, we are going to play this game. We are going to try to win this money, but I need you to know something first. You have already shown more strength and love than most people demonstrate in a lifetime. What you have done for your family, the burden you have carried, that is not weakness. That is the definition of love. But from this moment forward, you do not have to carry it alone anymore. The questions began, though the game felt almost irrelevant now. Sarah answered through her tears. Name something that gets better with age. Love, she said. Survey said, number 2 answer. Name something you hold on to. Memories, number 1 answer. Name something people promise. Forever, number 3 answer. By the time the round ended, Sarah had scored 187 points, bringing their total to 352, one of the highest scores of the season. But the points hardly mattered. What mattered was that a woman who had been carrying an unbearable secret alone for 5 years had finally been able to speak her truth. When the episode aired 6 weeks later, the response was unprecedented. The clip of Sarah's confession went viral within hours, garnering over 100 million views in the first week. But this was not the typical viral moment driven by shock or entertainment value. This was different. People were sharing it with messages about the hidden struggles families face, about the caregivers who suffer in silence, about the weight of protecting loved ones from difficult truths. Alzheimer's organizations reported a surge in calls from families dealing with early onset cases. Many said they had been hiding the diagnosis from extended family, from employers, from friends. Sarah's public revelation gave them permission to stop pretending, to ask for help, to acknowledge the reality they were facing. Support groups specifically for spouses of early onset Alzheimer's patients saw membership increase dramatically. People who had been suffering in isolation found communities of others who understood their unique challenges. The response from the medical community was equally significant. Neurologists and social workers began discussing the phenomenon of hidden caregiving, the way spouses and family members often conceal the severity of cognitive decline out of a desire to protect their loved one's dignity or their own family's normalcy. Healthcare providers started implementing better screening questions to identify caregivers who were struggling in silence. Insurance companies reviewed their policies regarding early onset dementia coverage, acknowledging how the long duration of younger patients' decline created catastrophic financial burdens. For the Mitchell family, the immediate aftermath was both difficult and liberating. Emma, Olivia, and Sophie struggled to process the reality that their father was not just forgetful, but actually sick with a terminal illness. They experienced anger that their mother had kept this from them, grief for the future they would not have with their father, and fear about what lay ahead. But they also began to understand so many things that had not made sense. Their father's absences, their mother's exhaustion, the financial stress that had seemed to appear from nowhere. Family therapy helped them navigate these complex emotions. With the secret out in the open, they could finally grieve together instead of Sarah grieving alone. The girls began participating in their father's care in age-appropriate ways, spending time with him on activities he could still enjoy, taking on more household responsibilities to ease their mother's burden, learning about his disease so they could prepare for the changes ahead. The family dynamic shifted from one of carefully maintained pretense to one of honest acknowledgement and shared struggle. Robert's employer, upon learning of his diagnosis through the viral episode, responded with unexpected compassion. Rather than terminating him, they restructured his position to accommodate his limitations. They reduced his responsibilities and travel requirements while maintaining his salary and benefits. His colleagues, who had noticed his struggles but attributed them to poor performance, now understood and became a support system rather than a source of stress. The company even highlighted their response as part of their commitment to supporting employees with serious health conditions. The financial support that emerged was overwhelming. The $20,000 from Family Feud was just the beginning. Steve Harvey's foundation established a fund specifically for families dealing with early onset Alzheimer's, with the Mitchell family receiving the first grant. Viewers sent donations totaling over $300,000. An anonymous benefactor who had lost a spouse to early onset Alzheimer's paid off the Mitchell's mortgage entirely, ensuring Sarah would have one less financial burden as Robert's care needs increased. Sarah reduced her work hours to spend more time with Robert while his awareness remained relatively intact. They took a family trip to Hawaii, something they had always talked about but never done. They made videos for the girls, Robert recording his thoughts and memories while he still could, creating a library of his voice and presence for his daughters to have when he was no longer able to communicate. They celebrated small moments, ordinary days that took on extraordinary meaning because they knew time was limited. Sarah became an advocate for caregivers and families affected by early onset Alzheimer's. She spoke at medical conferences about the isolation of hidden caregiving and the need for better support systems. She wrote articles for nursing journals about maintaining professional competence while dealing with personal crisis. She partnered with Alzheimer's organizations to develop resources specifically for families facing early onset diagnosis, addressing the unique challenges of dealing with the disease in younger patients who still have school-age children and careers. Steve Harvey remained profoundly affected by his encounter with the Mitchell family. In interviews, he spoke about how Sarah's confession had changed his perspective on the families who appeared on his show. "Everyone has a story," he would say. "Everyone is carrying something. Our job is not just to entertain but to create space for truth." Sarah Mitchell gave me a gift that day. She reminded me that behind every smile, there might be someone who is barely holding it together. She reminded me that strength sometimes looks like falling apart in public because you simply cannot hold it together in private anymore. 2 years after that watershed moment on Family Feud, Robert's condition had progressed significantly. He required assistance with most daily activities and had difficulty recognizing people outside his immediate family. But he still knew Sarah. He still knew his daughters. On good days, he could still express love and appreciation for them. Sarah had moved him into a memory care facility, using the funds raised through the viral moment and subsequent support to ensure he received the best possible care. The decision to place him in professional care had been agonizing, but Sarah's therapist and Robert's neurologist had helped her understand that some needs exceed what even the most devoted spouse can provide. Sarah visited him every day after work, often bringing one or more of the daughters with her. They would sit with him, share simple meals, look at old photographs, play familiar music. Sometimes he engaged fully, telling stories from their past. Sometimes he seemed confused about who they were, but they showed up regardless, honoring him with their presence whether or not he could fully appreciate it. Emma, now 20 and in college, had decided to pursue a degree in neuroscience with a focus on degenerative diseases. Her experience watching her father's decline had transformed her career aspirations. She wanted to contribute to research, to be part of finding better treatments or even a cure for the disease that had stolen her father from her family. Olivia, 18 and preparing for college, had become an advocate for young caregivers, starting a support group at her high school for students dealing with sick parents. Sophie, 16, volunteered at the memory care facility where her father lived, bringing joy to other residents while spending time near her dad. Sarah published a memoir 3 years after the Family Feud appearance, titled Remembering When He Forgets. The book detailed her experience caring for Robert, the decision to hide his diagnosis, the weight of that secret, and the unexpected relief of public confession. But more than just a personal story, it became a practical guide for other families facing similar situations. Sarah addressed the financial challenges, the emotional toll, the difficult conversations with children, the grief of losing someone who is still physically present, and the importance of seeking support rather than suffering in isolation. The book resonated with thousands of caregivers who recognized their own experiences in Sarah's story. Support groups used it as a resource. Therapists recommended it to clients dealing with similar situations. Medical schools incorporated excerpts into their training on family dynamics and chronic illness. Sarah donated all proceeds to Alzheimer's research and family support services, turning her pain into resources that might help others navigate similar journeys. The Family Feud episode became a teaching tool in unexpected places. Marriage counselors used the clip to facilitate discussions about communication and shared burden in relationships. Medical ethics courses screened it when discussing patient autonomy and family dynamics. Psychology programs examined it as a case study in protective deception and the costs of emotional isolation. Business schools referenced it in discussions about supporting employees with serious health issues. The moment had transcended its origin as a game show confession and become a cultural touchstone for conversations about love, duty, and the complexity of caregiving. 5 years after that devastating revelation on stage, Sarah reflected on the decision to finally speak her truth in such a public way. In many ways, it was not a decision at all, she said in an interview. It was a breaking point. I had carried that secret for so long that when Steve asked that simple question, I simply could not maintain the pretense anymore. But looking back, breaking was the best thing I could have done. Not just for me, but for my family, for Robert, for my daughters. We finally got to be honest about what we were facing. We finally got to grieve together instead of me grieving alone. That is what love should be, not one person carrying everything while pretending to be fine, but people facing difficult realities together. When asked what she would say to other caregivers carrying similar secrets, Sarah's advice was clear and compassionate. Tell the truth, ask for help. You cannot do this alone, no matter how strong you are. You cannot protect your loved ones from reality forever, and trying to do so will destroy you. The people who love you want to help. They want to share the burden. Give them that chance. Let them be part of the journey, even the difficult parts. Especially the difficult parts. Steve Harvey invited the Mitchell family back to Family Feud for a follow-up segment 3 years after the original episode. Robert was in the audience but no longer able to participate actively. Sarah and her daughters appeared on stage, and Steve asked them to reflect on how their lives had changed since that moment of confession. Emma spoke about her commitment to Alzheimer's research. Olivia discussed her advocacy work for young caregivers. Sophie shared how volunteering at the memory care facility had taught her about dignity and compassion. Sarah talked about the relief of no longer carrying the secret alone and the unexpected blessings that had come from public vulnerability. But the most powerful moment came when Sarah spoke directly to Robert, who was watching from the audience. She knew he might not fully comprehend her words, but she spoke them anyway. "You are still the love of my life. You are still the best decision I ever made. This disease has stolen so much from us, but it has not stolen what matters most. We still love you. We will always love you. You taught our daughters what commitment looks like. You showed them that marriage is not just the easy moments. It is showing up for the hard ones too. That is your legacy. Not the things you have forgotten, but the love we will always remember." The impact of Sarah Mitchell's confession on Family Feud extended far beyond her individual family. It sparked a national conversation about caregiving, about the hidden struggles of families dealing with chronic illness, about the pressure to maintain appearances even when falling apart inside. It challenged the cultural narrative that strength means suffering in silence and demonstrated that sometimes the bravest thing we can do is admit we need help. As this powerful story demonstrates, the truth we carry in silence often becomes heavier than the truth we speak aloud. Sarah Mitchell thought she was protecting her family by hiding her husband's diagnosis and shouldering the entire burden alone. But in speaking her truth, even in the unexpected venue of a game show stage, she gave herself and her family the gift of shared struggle, honest grieving, and collective strength. She reminded millions of viewers that marriage vows about sickness and health are not just words, but commitments tested in the hardest moments of life. If this story moved you, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more powerful true stories about love, sacrifice, and the strength we find in our most difficult moments. Share this with someone who might be carrying a burden alone, someone who needs to know that asking for help is not weakness but wisdom, someone who needs to be reminded that we are stronger together than we ever are in isolation. Sarah Mitchell's courage in revealing her devastating truth teaches us that sometimes the walls we build to protect others actually isolate us, and that speaking truth, even when it is painful, creates space for authentic connection and genuine support.